Alright, hey guys, this video is going to go over writing rules for reflections and translations. So remember, a reflection is a flip. So if you flip it over an axis or flip it over a line of reflection, and a translation is where I take an image or a picture and I slide it. Okay, so I slide it. Alright, so we're going to start with reflections. Alright, so I drew a picture here of a triangle, ABC. Okay, and I'm going to start I started by writing the coordinates. So for A, it's -1, 2, and for B, it's -3, 3. I'm not going to worry about C right now. All right, my directions are going to be to reflect it over the x-axis, okay? So that's going to be my line of reflection. We went over that in class. So that means I'm going to flip it over this line, the x-axis. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to flip it down here. All right, so when you do a flip, remember, like right now, point A is 2 away from the line of reflection, so I need to come 2 away down here. So I'm going to come down here. There's my new A, and I call that A prime. Okay, if I look at C, right here, right now it's 1 away from my line of reflection, so I'm going to come down 1 away here, and that would be C prime. And then if I look at B, right now it's 1, 2, 3 away. I'm going to come down 1, 2, 3. Okay, and I'm going to put that right there. There's my B prime. All right, I'm going to connect it. There's my new triangle. So I flipped it right over the x-axis. So let's write the new coordinates of my points. So A prime is right here. It's -1, -2. So I'm just going to write that. All right, and then B prime, it looks like it's -1, 2, 3, and then -1, 1, 2, 3. So it's -3, -3. All right, so to write the rule for a reflection, let's kind of take a look at the x-coordinates first. Look at the x-coordinates in A. It was -1, and then it was still -1. Look at B. It was -3, and it was -3. So nothing changed with the x-coordinates. So when I write my rule for the transformation, remember, it always starts like this, x, y with that arrow. And again, that means, well, here's my rule. Here's my original coordinates. Here's what I'm doing to them. Okay, so we just said the x-coordinate, it didn't change. So I'm just going to write a normal x. It stays the same. All right, then the y-coordinates, I need to figure out what happened to them. Well, if you look here, it was 2, and then in the new one, it became -2. The b, it started out as 3, and then it became -3. So they just became opposites. So that means I'm going to write it like this, -y. The y-coordinates became the opposite. Remember that negative sign can mean opposite. So this would be my rule for a reflection over the x-axis. Now, let's see if that makes sense. Okay, if I look at A and A prime, it didn't move over at all. Nothing happened to the x. The x stayed the same. I always went over 1. The y is what flipped. So that's why it's -y. All right, so we have another reflection problem, and it says reflect over the y-axis. So I'm going to take this triangle. All right, I'm going to label my x and y axis. So I'm going to flip it over this axis right here. All right, so A I see is 2 away, so I need to come 2 away over here. There's my A prime. B is 1, 2, 3, 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my B prime. And C is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's my C prime. Okay, so I took it, I flipped it over that axis. Now, if I wanted to write the rule, remember, it always starts like this. It says you take your original coordinates. That's what this part is. And then here's what you do to them. Okay, now, I didn't write the coordinates down this time, but let's look at the x's. Let's look at A, okay? Now, the x's, looks like they changed. Over here, it was a positive. I went over +2. Over here, I went -2 to get to the A. So it looks like the x's became opposite, so I'm going to have to write -x. And then the y's, if you kind of look again, I went up 2 here. I still was up 2 here. That stayed the same, so it's just going to be a y. So here's my rule for a reflection over the y-axis. All right, my next problem is going to be a translation or a slide. So I'm going to take my original triangle. I'm going to slide it right 2, down 4. Okay, so I'm going to start with A, that's right here, and I'm going to slide it right 2 and then down 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's where my new point ends up. Right 2, down 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's my A prime. I'm going to do the same with B. Right 2, down 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my B prime, my new one, right? And C, right 2, down 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my C prime, okay? So all I did was take that image, or the original picture, and I slid it right 2, down 4, and I got my new one, which is called an image. Okay, so now what we need to do is figure out, how do I write the rule? Well, I'm just going to start by writing the coordinates of point A. Looks like point A's coordinates are -2, -1. Okay, I'm going to just kind of compare that to A prime's coordinates, which is 0, 1, 2, -5. Okay, and let's just kind of see what happened here. And first I better fix this. This was -2, -1. Okay, so let's just look at the x coordinates first so we can write our rule. X, y. Okay, I need to figure out what happened to the x coordinates. Well, it went from -2 to 0. Well, if it went from -2, think about going from -2 right over here to 0. That means I would slide right 2, or I'm adding 2. From -2 to 0, I had to add 2 to get to that. So I'm going to add 2 here. And then my y, I went from -1, okay, and I went down to -5. So that's like I subtracted 4, so it's down 4. So here's my rule for that translation. X plus 2, y minus 4. All right, when you do translations, I just kind of want to point out something to you. Anytime you have a translation rule, you're adding something to the coordinates. So if I said x minus 3, adding or subtracting, and y plus 2, if you're confused on what's happening, just draw a little sketch, okay? Just put a point anywhere, okay? And it says x minus 3. Now, you guys know this is the x-axis. If it's minusing 3, it's going that way from the coordinate because that's the x's. So that means I have to be sliding, and it has to be left because it's minus 3. And then think about the y coordinate. It says plus 2. Well, the y is up and down, so that means I'm going to have to be adding 2 more from what this point was. So that means I'm going to have to be sliding up 2. So that's what that rule would tell me. All right, so I have 3 rules written here. So why don't you guys go ahead and try to see what kind of transformation did we do with these rules. So push pause, try them out, and then push play when you're ready. All right, so my first rule says, well, you take your original. Here's what you do to it. It says x minus 4. So if you need to, sketch a picture. Here's my x, here's my y. Just put a point wherever you want. I'll just put it there. And it says x minus 4. That means I'm going to be moving, the x is this way, -4. So that means I'm sliding left 4, or translating. Now the y, it doesn't say anything to do to it, so it just stays. So all I'm doing is taking it, sliding it left 4. Okay, let's look at the second one. It says -x. Well, first thing I would do is just put a point. Okay, and you know it's x, y. And then if this is the x right now and it becomes the -x, so really just think like, okay, maybe I went over 2. The x becomes the opposite, so it comes over here. So that means I actually flipped it or reflected it over the y-axis. And you can see that here. I took it here, I flipped it over here. The only thing that changed was the x. And then it says y plus 3. Well, the y is up and down. If it says plus 3, then I must have slid up 3. Okay, all right, and let's look at the last one. Okay, the last one says x, y. It says x, and then it says -y. Again, draw a sketch if you need to. Okay, put a point. It says the x stays the same, so I didn't really move that. But it says the y becomes the opposite. So the y is the up and down. So if it was up, now it's down. So it looks like I flipped it or reflected it over, which axis does it look like? Well, it's the x-axis this time. So flipped over the x-axis. So that's what those rules would tell me. So if you need to go back and watch any more of these, just go back and rewatch any examples. And again, this was for writing rules.